Hi, I'm Mackenzie.
Hey, I'm Denise, and welcome to the podcast from Rundown to Renewed.
We're continuing with the fruit of the Spirit, which is found in Galatians 5:22 to 23, and says, "But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self control. Against such things there is no law."
Yeah, so we're going to work through kindness today. And so, something that's important to note is kind of the differences between kindness and being nice.
Mm.
So, being nice focuses more on our own behavior and presentation of whatever it is that we're doing to be nice, whereas kindness shifts the spotlight over um, to others, to serving them and putting them first. It's not doing good based on what we're gonna get out of it,
Mm.
or kind of making other people feel good all the time, but it's doing what God says is right in a way that is genuinely kind, loving them and serving them.
Yeah, and I think with that, I think about confrontation because a lot of times you want to go into that in love, in with their best interest, and like
Right.
pointing something out to them with their best interest. So
Right.
I think about confrontation with that and how you can do that with kindness
hmm
when you are in the fruit of the spirit.
Well, and I think too, if you're confronting someone about something, you're noticing something. Maybe it's a behavior or a pattern or whatever that is destructive
Mm,
to that person.
right.
And so it can be maybe like a challenging thing, right? Like that no one wants to confront, these patterns and these destructive behaviors, but that is kindness because you
Mhm.
don't want to see them go down certain paths or continue. And I mean, it's not up to us what people decide to do, but I think that there's wisdom in approaching people.
Yeah, and if you're on the receiving end of that, if someone comes to you to
hmm
confront you
hmm
about something, like being kind to them instead of defensive and
Right.
aggressive, showing that kindness, like noticing, okay, they care enough to confront me and
Yeah.
talk to me about this.
Yeah. And that's important too, because we want to be on the defensive when we're being confronted.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes being nice to people can kind of come with like strings attached.
Mm.
Like I'm gonna do this for you, so you'll recognize me and you'll recognize what I'm doing for you. But
Right.
kindness doesn't look like that. God's kindness especially does not look that way. It's not just this like nice and sweet thing. It's also honorable and virtuous. And again, like for the benefit of the other person
Mm. Yeah.
or other people, whoever. Yeah.
Right. Something else I think of when it comes to being nice is sometimes we do things out of obligation and we feel like we're nice by doing those things, whether that's serving in church or saying yes when you actually really want to say no,
hmm
volunteering for different things, family functions. Sometimes we're doing things out of obligation because it's the nice thing to do. So check yourself, check your heart.
hmm
And I
hmm
think if you're doing anything out of obligation, it would be wise to go to God and pray about that situation.
Yeah. Well, and if you're doing something out of obligation, you're not in a great headspace then either.
Right.
So you're
And it's not serving
right.
others.
Right.
Yeah.
There's no kindness
Hmm.
in obligation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So today, our first Bible character is Rahab, and you're going to find her story in Joshua 2. So, like to set up our story, Joshua is now leading the Israelites. Moses has passed away, and Joshua is the one in charge, right? So he's leading the Israelites to the promised land, and we are moving into that part of scripture.
Yeah. So they couldn't just walk up to a land and be like, this looks great. Let's settle here, put their flag down. So they came across the city Jericho that God was calling him to, and it was a fortified city filled with enemies of Israelites. So Joshua sent two spies there to see what they were dealing with. And this is where Rahab enters the story.
Yeah. So Rahab invited them into her home, and the king found out, and he ended up sending guards to Rahab's house because they don't want the Israelites
No.
there.
Yeah.
They're afraid of them. They don't want them anywhere near them. And so when these guards show up, Rahab lies, and she said, that they went that direction, go look for them that way, what have you. And she kind of led them away. When in reality, the spies were actually on the roof of her home for protection.
Yeah. And in Joshua 6 later, when the Israelites followed God's instruction to Jericho, Joshua declared that only Rahab and her house would be protected. And they did that.
Yeah. And Rahab, before that happens, she makes the Israelites promise her that her and her family will be protected. So they kind of set up this whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that is how that happened. That's how they kind of passed over her house. There were things in place to make that happen. And so not only was Rahab saved, but the cool part of this story is that Rahab is actually in the family lineage of Jesus, which is just like amazing. And she's one of 5 women in the Gospel of Matthew that's listed when they list out Jesus's lineage,
Yeah.
which is incredible. Absolutely incredible.
Yeah. I think that it's a humbling lesson that the love of God can come from any person.
Yeah.
Because Rahab was a prostitute, and she would have had every reason to shun the spies or to report them and turn them in. And she didn't do that. And she had an open heart and a caring mind because she knew who God was. She knew who these Israelites were, and she knew she wanted to be on their side.
Yeah. She was smart.
Yeah. Yeah.
She likely felt compelled to protect them in large part because of what she had heard about God's deliverance in the Israelites, and this piece just shows the importance of sharing our testimonies.
Yeah.
Not just because of anything that we've done, but because of everything that God has done in order to save us, deliver us, all of that.
Yeah. And if you read this story, she did ask for something in exchange, like protection over her and her family.
Right.
But she hid the spies first and then asked them.
Yeah.
She didn't have those strings attached. And she wasn't like, if you save me, I will hide you.
Yeah.
She protected them without a guarantee that she would receive anything from it.
Which is, she had nothing to go on. Like these men could have completely taken advantage of her, hurt her, all like she's just going off of, she's just protecting. She's got to have this beautiful heart in order to do such a thing, and this trust, and her story is one of the earliest examples of how the family of Jesus includes everyone.
Yeah.
Right? Like, even though, Jesus doesn't arrive for like generations after this, right? But it was probably challenging for anyone to really imagine that he could come from a family of a prostitute.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it would have made so much more sense for Jesus to be born of a royalty. And this is where God just completely flips the script and allows for Jesus to come from humble people and outcasts.
Yeah.
Truly.
Yep. So God continues to show us Jesus's humble origins. Like, it's so cool to think about all these things he could have come from, but what was chosen. And like people like you and me,
Right.
And so, like Denise said before, Rahab is just 1 in 5 women that's even mentioned through Matthew's genealogy. And this was a time when women weren't ever mentioned in genealogies. So Rahab had a huge role.
Yeah. crazy. It's amazing, and her kindness was one that stood out for
Yeah.
hundreds of
Mm.
years, like as this act of salvation for just these two Israelites that and her kindness here completely paved the way for Jesus
Yeah.
to save all of mankind. Like when you go back in time and you just look at that piece right there of Rahab in his genealogy. It's she was just doing what she thought was the best thing, and she was offering kindness, and that kindness paved the way.
Yeah. And I was thinking about her story and like how can we relate that to today? Because, typically we don't have someone knocking on our door
We don't need to hide
looking for
people.
a place to hide because
Yeah.
our city's going to get destroyed. Um, but I was thinking with like family generational patterns and how you may know that something is bad that you're like choosing to continue to do in your family,
Yeah.
or you may know people that have been destroyed from that and you're like, I am
Mhm.
not going to allow that in my family. So we have, if we want a different outcome, we have to choose something different that aligns with God. If those family patterns are not biblical from the Lord,
Mhm.
are they harming you? And what are you going to do to make sure that those don't pass down?
Yeah.
Because that's what Rahab did.
Yeah.
She saw what could happen with her family and she's like, "No, I'm not standing for this."
Yeah.
She went against everything, her own people. And we can do that too in our families. We can say, "No, this is not continuing
Yeah.
in our families."
Stops with me.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I was actually sort of talking to my mom about this a couple of weeks ago, and she was just mentioning how she was watching a mom do something with her kids and how the mom allowed her kids to process whatever was happening and just the different ways that she was doing that. And my mom was just very interested in that. She's like, that's not what I was taught.
Mm,
And I was sharing with her, I said, yeah, but you also chose to change certain things from what you learned, and it's like when you know better, you do better.
yeah.
And I was sharing with her, certain things that I carry from what my parents did, and now what I feel is the most healthy for my own children. And it's just this continual choice of know that this pattern of behavior does not have to continue
Right.
with me.
Hmm.
And that is an act of kindness for yourself. And that is an act of kindness to your children because
Hmm.
you are choosing to not allow that anymore. So then they don't have to deal with it. So then your grandchildren don't have to deal with it. And it's just, again, it's that thought process of when we know better, we do better.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think another thing that comes up with kindness that we were talking through is, we tend to look at the outward appearance of people, but God looks at our hearts. And so, it's so important that we show kindness to other people. And I think when we look at other people in love, it takes out this need to fix. It takes out our own agendas, our own controls, maybe even ways that we want to manipulate a situation. And instead of doing all of that, and that could look like anything, right? Like say I have a friend who has a problem and I think I can fix it. So then
Is that friend me?
no, you're good. But but let's say it's Mackenzie and Mackenzie has a problem and I can fix it. I am the ultimate fixer. And I'm not loving her.
Hmm.
And I'm not looking at her in love in that way. I'm looking at her as a project.
Right.
And
Yeah.
and God doesn't look at us like we're projects. So why do we do that?
Yeah.
And so I think that it's again, this is another piece of just checking ourselves.
Right.
Am I approaching this person in kindness and in love, or am I approaching this person with an agenda?
Yeah.
And it's not that we even do it, like we even know we're doing it sometimes. This is, I think it's just part of being human. And I
Hmm.
think when we see people struggling, we naturally want to fix things.
Yeah.
But sometimes us fixing it really makes things worse.
Absolutely.
Sorry, not sorry, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I think that, something that helps me in those types of moments when I can be judgmental over someone is like they are a child of God.
Right.
God loves them just as much as they love me.
Yeah.
And I'm called to show kindness to everyone,
Mhm.
regardless.
Yeah.
Like we all in America, we all have our opinions and we all have our voices to be heard.
Right.
Choose kindness.
Yeah, what are you using your voice for?
Yeah.
What are you, and it's like you reap what you sow.
Hmm.
So what are you pouring out there?
Right.
'Cause that's what's gonna come back. Mhm.
So, moving on to our next person, we're going to talk about Naomi. We both love this story. It's found in Ruth, the book of Ruth. So, Naomi and her husband and their two sons, they leave Bethlehem because of a famine and they are going to Moab to escape it. And through that time, the two sons end up getting married to Moabite women. And then the husband dies and both sons die. So now you have the mom, Naomi, and the two daughter in laws. And Naomi encourages the daughter in laws to go back to their home because they're young and beautiful and can live out their whole life. So she encourages them to go back, and one does, and one does not. One decides to stay with her, and that's Ruth. And she abandons all that she knows and to return with Naomi. And they returned with nothing and they were women. So they're at the bottom of the totem pole here
Yeah.
for returning back to Bethlehem.
Yeah, they're not in a good spot. And so, at the time it was custom for the owners of the fields to kind of leave the outsides for the poor so they could like kind of glean off of any of these leftover crops to get what they need. And so Naomi knows a field manager, Boaz. Yep. And so Naomi, kind of gives Ruth these directions to go and collect from this field.
So instead of holding on to Ruth for herself, Naomi encourages Ruth to stay close to the female servants
Mhm.
and also to pursue Boaz so that she could be taken care of going forward because Naomi didn't think she could take care of her, right? So Boaz surely can.
Hopefully. Yeah. That's what she's thinking in
Yeah.
that moment, right? And
Yeah.
so Boaz hears that Ruth is related to Naomi. And so he ensures her protection to collect food, right? So Naomi gives like these specific instructions because Ruth doesn't know any of this. Like this isn't her people, this isn't her
Right.
land. So
Yeah.
so Naomi is choosing to give her these instructions to make sure that she takes care of her. And what happens is Boaz ends up buying the land that belonged to, so this land that they're in actually belonged, used to Naomi's husband. And so like Ruth kind of comes with the land because
Yeah.
she's related now through marriage. And so Boaz ends up marrying Ruth because he takes the land.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And when they get there, Naomi was in a really dark hole. Like
Mhm.
she lost her husband and two sons and everything. And I think it's so cool. She didn't rely on Ruth to get her out of it.
Right.
Like she wanted Ruth to have a life that she didn't think that she could provide for her. So she's giving her all of these instructions to set her up for success.
Well, it's like when you're grieving and you're in just such a dark place, like it can be so easy to just, you don't do it intentionally, but you just want to pull other people down with you so you're
Mm,
not in that alone.
yeah,
And Naomi could have 100% done that here
absolutely.
with Ruth. And instead, she's looking out for the best interest of Ruth. She's honoring what Ruth has done for her.
Hmm.
And so, having the willingness to let go of something with the trust that God's going to take care of it takes an incredible amount of courage.
Yeah.
But because of Naomi's kindness to Ruth, kind of taking her under her wing, sharing with her where she needs to go, making sure that she's protected, she helps Ruth to also become a part of Jesus's family lineage, which is super cool. Both women that we're sharing about in all their kindness, they are both part of Jesus's family lineage. And Boaz, this is super cool. I did not know this until today, was Rahab's son.
The prostitute
The
that we just
prostitute.
talked about
Yeah. I love it.
redeems this whole family.
I love it.
That's so
Amazing.
cool.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, as we reflect on kindness, we have some discussion questions that we will answer also. So, the first one is, when were you shown kindness?
Hmm.
Denise?
So, something that Mackenzie did for me actually was the first thing that came to mind. So, this past Christmas, um, if you are divorced or you know people that are divorced, you know that holidays kind of bring on their own heaviness.
Yeah.
And Christmas was just that for me. It was there was a lot of cool things going on with family, but it was also just really hard. And I think it was like Christmas Eve or Christmas Eve, a day or two before Christmas, and Mackenzie just texts me. And she's like, "Hey, I'm making some sourdough cinnamon rolls and I'm gonna drop them off at your house. When are you gonna be home?" And none of our times aligned. And she just dropped them off. I think it was Christmas Eve
Hmm.
that she dropped them off while I was at church. And it was just this it was just this really like nice light moment in a dark time. And I had my kids for Christmas Eve night and Christmas morning, and that was wonderful. And my kids and my sister and brother-in-law and my parents were here. We all had kind of Christmas morning at my house, which was amazing. And the kids were all obsessed with the cinnamon rolls. It was just a really easy breakfast on a crazy morning.
Yeah.
And that was really, and actually like kind of talking this out, I had also some really good friends who invited me over for Christmas dinner. And that was really needed
Mm.
as well. And they
Yeah.
actually do something really cool where they have people that don't have family, they just invite. And I just think that's such a
Mhm.
Jesus-y thing to do.
Yeah.
But it was me and some other friends from church and also just some strangers I'd never met. And we all just got together for Christmas. And I thought, what a beautiful gift for people. And they knew how much I was hurting. And the kindness was, from Mackenzie and from them. It was just what I needed to really kind of get me through
Yeah.
a hard day.
Mm. I'm
Yeah.
glad I could bless you
Yes,
like that.
you did. And I'm grateful.
Um, for me, when I was pregnant with my son, I was not married and, you know, expected to be like outcasted by the church. And a lot of them like embraced me and
Mm.
gave me gifts for my son, like a car seat and stroller and those things. So that was that was really kind. It made an impact on me.
Yeah. Well, and it's like you said, you weren't expecting it. So
Yeah.
that probably just doubled the kindness.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Second question is, when have you offered kindness?
So my my best friend from childhood, our parents were like friends before we were even a thought. So we've been in each other's lives since before we were born. Her father-in-law passed away suddenly a little bit ago, and it like her the few days leading up to this happening, her kids were both sick with the stomach bug. Her husband was sick with the stomach bug. And then her father-in-law suddenly passes away. And then the following day, she gets sick with the stomach bug. So it was just this absolute chaos and grief and just hard.
Yeah.
And the day after he passed, I messaged her and I said, "Hey, what's your Venmo?" And she's like, "You don't need to send me anything." And I said, "What's your Venmo?" So she sends me her Venmo and I send her some money and I said, "Buy dinner on me." And she's like, and I didn't know that she was sick at this point. She's like, "Denise, I've been like on the floor sick and throwing up and I'm also trying to take care of my son and there's so much happening." And she's like, "I had no idea what to do for dinner, so thank you." And
Yeah.
it's like I just really felt led to do something and I didn't even know all the chaos, the
Yeah.
extra chaos that was going on. So it was such a gift to be able to do that for her.
Yeah, and I think that's important when God puts someone on your heart to do something
Just
like that.
just
Do
jump.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, cuz it's so much bigger than you. And that's such a it's just kind.
Yeah.
It's so good. Again, it's putting them first.
Yeah. For me, I like to send things in the mail and surprise people. So, um, I would just choose someone that's struggling and send them a little care package, a little happy mail, because what do we get in the mail besides bills and nothing fun?
Seriously. So true.
So it's fun to get a nice package knowing that you're being thought about.
Mhm.
So I like doing that.
Surprise packages are just fun because it's not like they're being sent on like a holiday or your
Right.
birthday. It's
Mhm.
just all of a sudden you have this package.
Yeah.
That's a really cool. That's fun. Yeah.
All right. Third question. And Denise and I sat with this for a long time. So you may have to sit with this for a long time also. But is there anyone that comes to mind that you need to show kindness to?
Mm-hmm. Well, like she said, it took us a minute
Yeah.
to figure this one out or to just kind of see where we were led. But I have a friend who's just making some, well, they could be destructive choices. And I've noticed I've kind of pulled away a little bit. And after kind of working through this podcast episode and all of that, I just think it's just the reminder that they need love
Mm.
and they need compassion and kindness.
Yeah.
And so I plan on reaching out today just to check in
Yeah.
and see how they're doing.
For me, I think I can be my own worst critic. So I chose myself for this answer. And I think if you are a woman listening to this, I mean, even men,
Men do it too, for sure.
we can just be so hard on ourselves and be so kind to other people, but talk to ourselves terribly. So that's something that I'm learning and working on.
How do you practice kindness to yourself?
Well, when you have a reoccurring negative thought, I think just taking that thought captive
Hmm.
and going to the word and being like, okay, so I'm not a piece of crap. So what does the Bible actually say that I am? Oh, I am fearfully and wonderfully made. I am
Hmm.
far more precious than a ruby.
Hmm.
I am
Hmm.
chosen. I am adopted. I am an heir of the throne of
Hmm.
God. Like, if
Hmm.
you don't feel wanted, go read the Bible and see what
Yeah.
God says about you, because you're going to be like, "What? I'm an heir of the throne."
Yeah, it's
Like,
amazing. Well, and you were sharing with me earlier about your daughter and just
mm,
when
yeah,
they have a friend who was just kind of nervous and fearful about some things
yeah.
and her daughter was like, "Didn't you tell her that she doesn't have a spirit of fear?" And it's just such a win when your kids
Yes,
are saying things like that.
yes,
Don't ever doubt the power of like what you're saying to yourself, but then also what you're affirming in the people you love,
yeah,
your kids, your
absolutely.
family, your friends.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll continue this conversation over in our community Facebook page. Um, Make sure you're a part of that. We look forward to diving in deeper with you.
Mhm.
So for now, if you're feeling run down,
There is space for you at our table.